The woman has a beautiful and elegant face, but because of the divorce with the negative husband embarked on the road of blind date. However, what she never expected is that this blind date is actually a man of only 1 meter 2. She would like to directly open the mouth to refuse this date, but see the other side of the awkward height. She can only put to the edge of the mouth words and swallowed back. But the man still saw the slight change in her face. In order to draw closer to her relationship, the man mockingly talking about the height of the various benefits brought about by the look at his eloquent manner, and also gradually changed his initial thoughts. She began to listen carefully to the mouth of the various things told by Daniel, and even because of the humor of the words he said, and uncontrolled laughter. Without realizing it, he and Daniel began to talk freely. As she gradually got to know Daner, she realized the true meaning of the saying that you can't judge a book by its cover. Although he had a body of 5 feet 2 inches, he could be in charge of a construction company with thousands of employees and would be bullied by a puppy despite driving a multi-million-dollar luxury car. His height was his hardest problem, but he never let it change his attitude towards life. His wife left him at an early age, but he would still spend time with his son on a daily basis and teach him the lessons of life through entertainment. He may not have been a perfect man, but he was a successful father and entrepreneur. Annie, on the other hand, was a confident and generous lawyer, but her failed marriage led her to divorce and choose to live on her own. But what made her feel most desperate was that she opened a law firm with her ex-husband, and after the divorce she was unable to leave straight away because of all the expenses, so she had to settle for a parasitic, resigned existence to maintain the life in front of her. When the two understand each other's basic situation, Daniel's maturity and steadiness gradually change Annie's initial opinion, and her transformation is also keenly noticed by Daniel. So he took the opportunity to invite into an interesting place, but he never thought that the interesting place in his mouth was at a height of 10,000 meters. Shock was written all over her face as she looked down at the distant mountains and verdant forests. But in the very next second, the moment Daniel opened the airplane hatch, her surprise instantly turned into horror. How could she not believe that a man who was only 1 meter 2 in height would dare to challenge such an extreme sport? The fear in her heart caused her to shake her head vigorously, trying to get Daniel to stop and take herself home. But Daniel tried his hardest to calm her down, and his gentle but firm voice stopped Anne's nerves. By the time the two of them took the leap, and screams were as loud as they could be. But as she looked down at the earth and admired the magnificent view, the fear in her heart was surprisingly gradually replaced by excitement and joy, until she was strolling through a field of golden canola flowers with Daniel, and was still lost in the thrill and excitement of what she had just seen. The two, who had the most adorable height difference, didn't realize that they would soon fall in love with each other. Looking at the back of Annie driving away, Daner's face overflowed with a kind of incomparably satisfied joy, as if this was the first time in many years that he felt the joy of being recognized. And Annie would, without realizing it, remember the short time she had spent with Daniel. Whenever she recalled Daniel's appearance, she couldn't help but smile a silly smile again, as if Daniel had become her only source of joy at the moment. Yet her joy was torn apart by the tediousness of her work, and Anne's depressing mood was at a loss as to how to alleviate it, much less what she could do to divert her irritation. It wasn't until she inexplicably dialed Daniel's number that a small smile appeared on her face when she heard Daniel's voice, and Daniel, who had heard Anne's voice, smiled the same way. He didn't ask Annie what reason she was calling for. Instead, he invited her once again to an interesting place. It was a tavern tucked away deep in an alleyway, and despite its slightly humble and dilapidated appearance, the only way in was by a familiar face swipe, which the lightly traveled Daner seemed to have long since grown accustomed to. At the dinner table, Daniel still kept his humor. Just a few words will be able to make him happy and laugh, as if all the troubles of the day in this moment disappear. And their eyes look at each other in the moment. Their heart of love also unconsciously spread to the air around them, until they finished their meal when Daniel sent her back home. He could not control to speak out of his heart.
Vous êtes très belle.
Annie didn't answer. She just replaced the entire thought in her heart with a kiss. When she got home, she was still immersed in her time with Daniel. She was clear that Daniel was the man of her dreams that fit her, even though he was only 5'2". Annie believed that as long as there was love in her heart, she could beat all the odds. But she seems to have forgotten how rough and bumpy the road of love is. One day, Annie dresses up extraordinarily beautifully and rides in Daniel's car without realizing that her ex-husband is hiding in the corner observing everything. Shock was written all over her ex-husband's face when he saw how close they were. But his shock changed to amazement when he saw Daniel driving like a child. And the next day, when it got to the point where her ex-husband taunted her with the idea of backing out of her life when she found the midget. But she still feels that time will change everything and make her love Daniel more deeply, and Daniel has been suffering because of his height. Although he has a strong ability to resist blows, but really to their own and around the huge difference in the environment, his heart will also appear incurable inferiority complex, and in the front of his beloved his inferiority complex will be added to a layer of pain. But when he saw Anne's eyes are full of love for their own, and even ignored all the surrounding everything only to enjoy the company of the moment, he let go of all the concerns with and together to devote to the music. The joyful music made their hearts intertwined in the music and their souls dance together in the melody. In this romantic and unforgettable moment, they also forgot their worries and physical defects. There were pairs of partners dancing on the dance floor, but it was as if only they were the protagonists of the ball. By the time Daniel drove Annie home again and reached the intersection of 10,000 words, he asked this Annie, "If you choose the right intersection, then I will take you home. If you choose the left, I will take care of you for the rest of your life." Annie was silent and didn't answer, but the joy on her face already told Daniel the answer. By the time Annie woke up from her sleep, she saw a letter that Daniel had left for him. "By the time you read this, I will have already left for work. I have prepared your favorite breakfast for you, and by the time you are done, you will surely want to have the next one. Daniel's letter makes Annie feel the sweetness of love again, and makes her believe that she can go to the end with him. But the very moment her makeup accidentally kicked the stool at her feet, a flinch once again arose in her heart. Though she thought it was just pride getting in the way, she still couldn't quite let it go because when confronted by her friend who asked her what her relationship with Daniel was, she didn't hesitate for a second to answer friends. And when she wanted to give Daniel a dress as a gift of her own, he would be asked by the store clerk how old he was buying clothes for. These thoughtless remarks would always remind her, too, of the image of her ex-husband maliciously mocking her for having a midget boyfriend. And although she felt that Daniel's height didn't bother her, it was as if real life was a constant reminder of all the ways in which he was inappropriate with Daniel. And when she delivers the gift to Daniel and sees his face full of happiness, she forgets all her worries and concerns again. But on a romantic evening, Daniel's words made her nervous. I can see the tension in your heart about our relationship, and I also understand that I am not a qualified partner. If you really cannot let go of my height problem, we can just be friends. Annie understands that his own undisclosed invisible hurt him, but also decided to retain the relationship, take him to meet his parents. But really came to see Annie to meet the parents. Annie's mother face is full of disgust, and even at the dinner table, unashamedly talking about midgets of all kinds of topics, so that the neighboring table also issued a cannot stop laughing. This moment Annie realized how difficult this relationship is, in reality and society under the double blow. Annie finally gave up this most cute height difference love. Taking advantage of the Daniel front checkout, she panicked to explain to her parents that they are just ordinary friends, but she did not want to break the relationship with Daniel. Can only be full of worry and confusion together, looking for the bright spot to adhere to this relationship. Daniel also knows how tired and powerless Annie is at this time. He wants to let go of Annie and let her go to find her own happiness, but he doesn't want to give up this hard-won relationship because he has long fallen into Annie's love vortex and can't extricate himself from it. But during a walk on the beach, their love was not able to withstand the blow of reality, because the shopkeeper who sold the clothes to Annie met Annie, and cared to ask about the clothes that Annie had bought for her child. In the face of the sudden inquiry, Annie was a bit at a loss for words, and could only flusteredly explain that they fit very well, trying to end the conversation. But in the next second after he finished his sentence, Daniel came to Annie with an ice cream in his hand, and looked at the other son, and he was wearing the same type of clothes, and even a little taller than he was. Daniel looked at Annie confused, wanting to talk, but did not know how to speak. And after returning home, they began an adventure. Daniel did not blame Annie, but instead is to understand her in their own get-together with a kind of awkward mood, but also understand that Annie and his height is an insurmountable gap. So he took the initiative to Annie proposed a breakup, on the one hand, in order to relieve Annie, on the other hand, is also in order to let him pursue belong to their own happiness. Once again, Annie did not speak, turned and left. But back on the road, she tears like rain, heart incomparable sadness. She thought she could overcome the cruel reality, find their own love, but really faced the ridicule. She has become a soldier who fled, lost the courage of the line. The other side of the Daniel also red eyes, filled with indescribable sadness and despair. He understood that even if he promised her the words of the end of days, but the reality of the chasm has long been cut off from all possible. As the saying goes, to catch a woman's heart, you have to catch her stomach first. But for a man without hands, and how to catch the stomach of the beloved, he knows that he is not destined to give him the happiness he expects, so he has long been prepared to die alone. Anne, who had left Daniel, remained sullen and uninterested in everything around her. She thought her life would be different after leaving Daniel, but she never thought that the difference would be the loss of her own happiness. When she took out her cell phone and tried to dial her beloved's number again, the guilt and remorse that welled up in her heart once again made her lose her courage. But time will always make people understand everything, will also make people think clearly about everything. She should not be too much emphasis on other people's views and opinions, because what kind of life is to live is their own decision, and their own living happiness, good or bad, is also their own decision. After thinking everything through, Annie decides to go ahead and take the initiative to win back Daniel. And her way to get back to Daniel is also different. She sat in the first time when Daniel took her skydiving airplane, want to use their own practical action to prove that they can break the fear, break other people's views and ridicule. When the plane flew to the Daniel Construction Company building directly above the moment, and did not hesitate to leap and choose to go to find their love, she closed her eyes and felt the wind whistling past her ears, only one thought in her mind, that is to go to find their own happiness. And the moment she bravely soars through the air, she has declared her firm belief in this love. As Annie dragged her trembling body to Daniel's, she spoke her first words of confession to him.
Parce que je voulais te montrer que j'avais plus peur, que j'étais prête à me lancer. C'était une métaphore. On s'en fout en fait des métaphores. Ils finiront par s'habituer. Oh, je le sais ça. Je suis libre. J'ai mis du temps, mais je suis libre. Je t'aime, petite.
Looking at his beloved, and Daniel also made up his mind to spend the rest of his life with him. Their love may not be understood by the world, but as long as the two people have the same heart and live a happy life, why should they care about the gossip of others? People are eager to have the most adorable height difference love, but if the height difference happens to different people, can you still accept it openly?